Alrighty, and admitting everybody that's here.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Wouldn't imagine being anywhere else on a fine late spring day.
If
But
the
with
poet,
you,
the
but
poet
with you.
laureate of Massachusetts transportation is here, you're in the right place.
I normally do haikus. You know,
Do you do haikus, Len?
I do haikus. You know,
Wow,
I did
what
one
about
last. I did one last night at town meeting for one of
Oh.
our articles. You know,
Wow. Do you do limericks?
no limericks. Not, I mean, not that I don't. I mean, not that I can't. You know, or not that I am above them. It's more that I just haven't tried. You know,
I've been to Limerick, but I don't do limericks.
you are.
Jonathan, would you do me a favor and could you read the accessibility statement on my behalf, please?
Yes, sir. One more, Logan.
When you're ready.
Oh, okay. I'll read the guidelines first, and then the accessibility statement. Guidelines: all participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. You can find that button at the bottom of the screen by clicking the reactions button and under the participants window. If you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. But if you are having any technical difficulties, please contact me, Jonathan Church, via the chat box, jchurch@ctps.org or 857-702-3709. The accessibility statement. Other way, Logan. Nope, I guess we don't have the accessibility statement on this one. So we just have the guidelines.
Do you want to take a moment and get them and read them?
I will get a accessibility statement. Stand by.
Thank you very much. I see Tegan is nodding, so we're doing something right.
Yes, I think we should read it for sure.
I'm attempting to
patience.
sign up my children for orthodontist appointments as I do this, so have pity on me
Yes, sir.
and my wallet.
We have one from May 26th. Logan, do you happen to have one handy?
Well, let me look right now. I just found one. I can read it if you'd like.
Please do.
Okay. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1, Level AA standards, and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to fully participate this evening, please reach out to Jonathan Church at cchurch@ctbs.org.
Okay. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Logan. Appreciate that. We have introductions coming up next. let's see, we'll do committee members first. Let me just start by saying hello for everyone. I'm Brian Kane. I'm the chair of the ANF committee, and I wanted to thank everybody for their forbearance over the last month. I had laryngitis and COVID and lots of other things going on, and seemingly every Thursday at 9 a.m. something just wasn't working. So I am very grateful to Jonathan and Tegan in particular for their forbearance and for working with me to get these going. And now I think we're in a position to get moving at the right cadence. And I'm very grateful for everyone's patience with me. Why don't we do the poet laureate himself, Len Diggins, to introduce himself, and then Len, you can choose.
Oh, wow. Double whammy. I go first. Well, I guess makes choosing easier. So I'm Leonard Diggins. I am representing the advisory council on behalf of, as a member of the MBTA Rider Oversight Committee, and I will hand it off to Eric Barassa.
Good afternoon, Eric Barassa with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and I'll hand it, let's see, I'll hand it to Tegan.
I think I'm supposed to defer to committee members first. So is there anyone else on the committee
Uh,
here?
that would be Derek.
Derek, why don't you go first, then I'll go, or leave you of your choice.
And then do Ken.
Oh, Ken, yeah.
Sounds good. Hi, everybody. Derek Cravat, MassDOT Office of Transportation Planning and Boston MPO Liaison, Manager of MPO Activities. And I'll hand it to Ken.
Hi, everyone. Ken Miller, Deputy Division Administrator, Federal Highway, Massachusetts.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tegan Tyke. I'm the Executive Director of the staff to the Boston Region MPO. Why don't I pass it to the next staff person I see in line, which is Silva.
Hi, everyone. My name is Silva Ibazian. I'm the project accountant at CTPS. And I will pass it on to Ralph.
Hi, my name is Haral Gandhi. I am the Director of Finance and Operations at CTPS.
Why don't we do Sandy next? I see Sandy in my list.
Good afternoon, Sandy Johnson. I'm a transportation planner with CTPS, the staff to the MPO. Tegan, should I hand it off?
Yes, please.
All right, Matt, you want to go next?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Matt Genova, Transportation Improvement Program Manager for the Boston Region MPO. And I'll pass it over to Lega.
Good afternoon, everyone. Shirley Murthy here, the Unified Planning Work Program Manager with staff to the Boston Region MPO. And I will pass it to Gina.
Good afternoon. I'm Gina Peril. I apologize for my non-functioning camera this afternoon. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for the Boston Region MPO. And I will pass, even though we've heard his voice, let's say hello again to Logan Casey.
Hey everyone, Logan Casey. I'm the Administrative Coordinator for the Boston Region MPO, and I'll pass it to Jonathan, I believe, who's left.
Thanks, Logan. Jonathan Church, Manager of MPO Activities with the Boston Region MPO.
Thanks, everyone, for doing that. At this point, we will move on to agenda item number 2, which is public comment. Are there any members of the public or anyone else that would like to make a comment? And if there are written comments, you can always provide a copy to staff by emailing Jonathan Church at jchurch@ctps.org if you are able. I don't think there's any members of the public with us today. If you can use the raise hand function if you are, or wish to speak at any time, we of course would be happy to hear from you. So we'll move on to a discussion of the topics for the operations plan. And this is based on the memoranda that Tegan, David, and Mark, I should use last names, of course, Tegan Teisch, who's here, Mark Drayson, and David from OTP presented at the March 23rd MPO meeting, which was, of course, referred to the ANF committee with a charge to come up with an operations plan. So these are really the areas that we've been asked to kind of delve into and consider. And I guess I want to sort of have a discussion around these. I also have a few other items that we might want to bring into this. But at this time, let me see Eric or Len or Derek or or Ken, if there's anything you wanted to add or bring up or discuss. Otherwise, we can sort of get into a topic about that. Eric, I know you'd sent me a few items after our last meeting around kind of how things work. And I'm very curious to get sort of your feedback on this plan and what your thoughts are. But I don't mean to call on you out of the blue. If you want to comment, I'd love to hear it. If not, we'll keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in kind of figuring out, what's the right sort of pace of kind of ticking through, these items. And I think this is a good start of issues. I think at the one of the last, or not the last, but as we were wrapping up the last tip discussion, we talked about kicking to this committee sort of the topic of like timely information for bringing project status to the MPO board, and not bringing projects sort of day of, and having that sort of like those procedures potentially incorporated into the operations plan as well.
Absolutely. Len, are you off mute? Did you want to say something?
Yes, I mean, so would this be a place where we would talk about interacting with the advisory council?
Please.
Okay, so I'd like to add that to the list then.
Do you want to elaborate, or do you just want to have it as a bullet item as interaction with advisory council?
Yeah, that's all, just bullet item.
Okay. All right. So, Ken, I know you and I have talked a little bit about these things. I wonder if I might ask you to sort of speak to this committee at one of its upcoming meetings, kind of about best practices and areas that you've seen around the rest of the Commonwealth, and kind of ways in which the Boston MPO differs from some of its peers, if you think that that has any merit. And the reason I bring it up is I recently, someone that Len knows well, Jenny Raitt from Arlington, is actually leaving to take over the North Middlesex Council of Governments, which is an MPO, I believe. And she and I have been talking. She actually lives in Brookline, so we serve on a few committees here in town. So we've been talking a little bit about sort of what that group does, and obviously not to say they do anything better or worse, just different. And I'm always interested in how peers work, and I firmly believe in the borrow and steal everything model if something's working well. And so I'm curious, Ken, if you might, if we might ask you at one of our upcoming meetings to kind of, talk to us and share your expertise, not just as a FHWA person, but as someone who's been both at CTPS and MassDOT. And I'm sure you will when you return to your camera. So why don't we take these one by one? And I guess what I'd like to hear from folks is what we think the work is going to be, and what are we going to have to dig in on? And we'll start with the election of board members. And Eric, this one is really you and I, but it goes deeper than just sort of how do we actually manage the election. And I also want to add in here kind of permanent members of the Boston MPO, in particular, all of the MassDOT seats. And when I say MassDOT, I mean that writ large, not just the secretary, but now it's the T. And we had a vote recently on a non-binding resolution that broke down kind of MassDOT, non-MassDOT lines, which I thought was fascinating. So I'd like to consider, who are the permanent members? And I'll put the advisory board on that. Does it make sense in 2022 for my organization to sit on this thing? And I'm perfectly happy to have that discussion. and I want to just sort of go through that and, does it make sense for MassDOT to control, I don't even know what it is, 9 votes right now or something? It's worth having the question. Simultaneously around election of board members, I've brought this up on a couple of different occasions, but I did want to talk about subregions. And I know that hi, Ken. Go ahead, Ken.
Oh, no, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just put on my video.
Well, we're just delighted to see you. So I was just asking if you wouldn't mind sort of talking to us at upcoming time about how other MPOs around Massachusetts and New England do this.
Well, sure, because remember, the MPO did vote to change the election process and have each subregion elect their either elect or, well, that's what you need to figure out, whether it's a caucus, an election of their subregional representative. And so I think there needs to be a discussion about, how does that happen? Does it happen at a subregional meeting? Does it happen by mail? I don't know. What are the different, Eric, obviously, Eric, that's is something that you need to think about, and what would be the best way to do that. There are the Pioneer Valley MPO does do that. They do have sub-regional representatives that choose their own representative. Derek may know better than I exactly how that's done, whether it's a caucus or an actual vote in each sub-region. They have 4 sub-regions, I think.
I think we should have a wrestling scrum.
Right.
Well, don't put that in the minutes, John.
Always for that, but but it's also something I think if you were going to prioritize these things, elections are going to be coming up, so this sort of needs to be figured out. So
on that topic, I do want to bring up the subregions, and I know the subregions are a little controversial, but as I've said before, I don't think I'm not sure how many people in cities and towns know what subregion their municipality belongs to. I'm also not sure that many communities either know they're being represented by another or feel like they're being represented by another. And I also don't know how many communities believe they actually represent other communities. And I do think we have a bit of a democratic deficit here. And I just wonder what that means. And I'm not saying that we should blow it all up. I'm just saying there are other models out there. For instance, my organization, every community is represented whenever the board meets, and we vote all the time. And sometimes it's messy. We have weighted votes, for instance, on some issues, and unweighted votes on others. There are other ways to do this, and I think if the body is going to meet virtually, you're going to continue to get additional interest in people serving on the body, and maybe we need to look at it. Now, I don't necessarily think having 101 communities on tip day is either going to be manageable or reasonable, but it is worth just having this discussion. Do we feel as if the subregions are representative anymore? I know they were created at a certain point in time, probably before a lot of us were born. And so, it's just worth having the conversation. And I'm not saying we should absolutely get rid of them, but I do think we should at least consider whether or not we feel as if they are continually representing each of the areas. Go ahead, Eric.
So I think the subregions are representative. We staff the subregional meetings. They meet about monthly. Transportation is a big topic of discussion at those meetings. We bring, we really try to foster not only issues that are, really specific to the subregion, but also sort of regional issues, like, for example, the MBTA's bus network redesign, right now, and tapping them into all like the public hearings that are happening. And I think the subregions do work. I think that I think you're right that not every single municipal official knows which MPO and MAPC subregion they are, but I think the planning staff do. And we certainly, really work to engage them. I feel like we did take this vote last fall to say, that moving forward, the subregional seats will vote for just that, just the municipalities in the subregion will vote for that subregional seat. So as Ken said, I think we need to make a decision about or start to put together sort of guidance, like, do we want that to be, like Ken said, should we say, hey, that's a caucus, you all get together, tell us, who you've elected, or do we want to run like an actual election, like just like we've done in the past with ballots, and do that on on the sort of the formal process that we've done, do that at the MAPC fall council meeting. And I'd be very interested in that kind of discussion, hearing more from others today, and maybe in another meeting. But to Ken's point, we typically communicate that process at the sort of end of July. We start to outreach to folks, tell them which seats are up. I off the top of my head, I can't remember. And then we seek, nominations, usually by like the first week of October, and then the election is usually at the end of October. One thing we want to do, obviously, is document all of that as part of the operations plan. But I do think, like, for these subregional seats, like, is there going to be a nomination process, or is it a caucus, and how does that work? So,
do you remember the last time the subregions were sort of looked at and borders may have been moved?
Yeah,
if at all.
There are, not in a holistic way. I don't. Before my tenure, was there sort of an evaluation of the subregions writ large, but we've had, some members have said, for example, like the town of Dedham has said, we're in, I think it's the Trick subregion, but we feel or maybe it's Swap, we feel more like we're in the inner core. And I think for a while they came to both meetings. And then, as you might remember, a number of years ago, we had a number of the municipalities say they felt like they were more a part of Old Colony, and they actually left. We lost a few, and they're still technically a part of MAPC and sort of part of MAPC subregion, but those folks tend to participate not as much in subregions.
I mean, I think we need to have an entire sort of hour-long discussion sometime just about the subregions and about the election issue. You and I think we can respectfully disagree about whether or not communities feel represented or not, and that's fine. I know that, as I told the story, I talked to people in this town a lot, and people, necessarily who are pretty involved don't feel that way, but that doesn't mean I'm right, and that doesn't mean you're right. It just means, maybe we're not communicating well. But I do think we should look at the subregions as part of the electoral question. And I guess I also just want to note that there are also some pretty odd discrepancies around what is, and for instance, the inner core of the MBTA district is different from MAPC's inner core, and it just does get confusing. So maybe we could figure out a way to synergize and harmonize a little bit of that stuff. But I do think we should have that discussion. And I'm not sure who the subject matter expert who could talk to us sort of about the history of MAPC subregions and how they came to be is. I don't know, Jonathan, if you know who that is, or Tegan, or anybody. But I'd be very curious. Ken, maybe and that's why your hand is raised.
Well, no, I don't know. And they are, I should point out, they are MAPC subregions. They're not MPO. They started as MAPC subregions, not MPO subregions. So, you know, that's where they came from. And the MPO adopted them basically. But I think having the elections by each subregion will, I think, help address some of the issues, Brian, that you brought up about, you know, people buying in and feeling represented. And I think that was one of the reasons I thought it was a good idea that the MPO did go to, you know, having, you know, each region elect their own official, so so they're closer to it. I mean, that's the way government works in the United States generally. You know, you elect the person that represents you. But I think that the question I think that needs to be answered also is, you know, what is the link between the people that go to sub-regional meetings and the chief elected official in the town, which is officially who votes, right? And the way it worked in the past. And I think that linkage needs to be thought of when you're figuring out how the elections are going to work. And Brian, I understand what you're saying about, you know, thinking about the subregions, but, you know, to Eric's point, time is, you know, I'm not sure there's time to rethink the subregions before the MPO has to do something about an election. But that's, certainly that's up to, you know, up to this committee. So.
Good point, Ken. Time does not stop. Do you know who might know about how the subregions were created and how it all came to be?
I mean, the person at MAPC that has the most institutional knowledge is Martin Pillsbury, who's been at MAPC since I think the early 80s. So he would definitely have some memory of it. But
yeah,
I mean, we could look at, we could do a little looking into what is sort of the history of how that's evolved over time.
I mean, yeah, again, we don't have to make a federal case of this. I'm just genuinely curious. And I also, do we still do the city town distinction? Is that as big of a deal as it used to be? Because that's really becoming a distinction without a difference. We now have cities that are towns and towns that are cities. So again, you know, we just need to think that through. You know, is this the right way to kind of organize the region's people? You know, I'm not sure, but I agree. We do need to document the election process. I'm not convinced that the way we organize it is the best way to organize it, but I'm also not convinced there's any better way. So there is that. Len, do you have any thoughts on that, or Derek?
Well, I mean, I'm curious.
You're a chief elected official. Len, what do you think?
Oh,
Your other job.
Yeah, with respect to the subregions, I don't really have any strong feelings one way or another about it. It's mainly because I just haven't thought about it. So I'm not saying that if I thought about it, I would be as neutral about it. I just need to think about it. Sorry. That's all I have for you.
I will add though that you know, the survey we did, I thought was helpful in that we did hear that you know, a major reason why folks, you know, don't run or aren't as engaged, or, you know, certainly aren't running for those seats, is because of the time commitment. And there is a time commitment. And I think the virtual format makes it much easier. People don't have to drive into Boston, you know, twice a month, and you know, it's like your entire day if you're coming from some communities. But still, there is a lot of time commitment in being on top of all the issues, reading the materials, et cetera. So yeah, that I think the survey was helpful in identifying, you know, some of the reasons why folks aren't you know, aren't running for the seats as much, because I know that was an issue, Ken, that you all raised in the certification review, was just like the competitiveness, you know, of the races, and that so many of the municipalities were the same, you know, and very little turnover.
I mean, I guess the thing that I always wondered is, does this have to be a competitive process? You know, can I hear what you're saying, that yes, in America, people are represented to elect to represent people. I mean, yes and no. We certainly don't have a democratically representative Senate. And many could argue that Congress doesn't really represent a lot of people anymore, but hey, we won't go there. My organization, everybody can come up to every meeting and vote, and every vote is counted. So,
Well, you raise a good point, Brian. There are, I know in the Pioneer Valley MPO, and again, Derek, correct me if it's changed or I don't remember correctly, but there's a group of three. I think the city of Springfield is a permanent member, but then there are three other, Jonathan, there are three other municipalities that two of the three mayors, they take turns. I think West Springfield, Holyoke, and Northampton, is it? I think they take turns representing. But then again, it's the time commitment and the MPOs other than Boston is significantly different. And then, if you wanted to do something here, like Eric says, I mean, it's such a time commitment that, people have to want to do it. It's not like they want to take their turn because it's not a big deal. I mean, it is a huge time commitment. So people have to want to do it, and you have to have somebody that's willing to do it. So
I don't think it's realistic to have 97 cities and towns engaged, debating, projects. I actually, when the MPO was increased, whatever, 2011 to 22 voting members, I remember thinking, oh, wow, we're never going to get anything done because it's going to be a lot of debate, discussion. And actually, I was proved wrong. I actually think that the MPO has functioned very well. I think the number is good. I think there is a good amount of representation. I think there's a lot of other issues before us about sort of the influence of the board members over certain things that I think would, I think how that could operationally be established might affect people's level of desire to be involved and things like that. So there is some sort of chicken and egg, going on as well.
But exploring Brian's notion about maybe you don't need to elect folks, I mean, it's that you could explore a model where you would tell municipalities the expectation is that you're going to be up in 3 years and start working with them to get them up to speed. They'll still have the election, to kind of say, well, we're the elections to sign off on it, to give other people input into validating that you are the person that will be up. And so that could maybe get other municipalities really thinking about it in a meaningful way. I mean, we can't force them, but you could say, look, you're up next. Let us work with you to get you up to speed so that when you are on the board, you understand what's going on. And if they say, I respectfully decline, they could go to the next municipality and say, look, we'd like for you to be up, in 3 years or whatever determined.
I think that'd be a very interesting thing to consider. I'm not sure how feasible it is, but yeah, the time commitment's real, and it's a big deal. And that's, I see it on my board too. It's the communities that are wealthier that have people that can go to meetings that tend to show up, because the smaller communities don't have folks that can go. And then that's just the nature of local government in Massachusetts. We also want to increase diversity significantly on all of these bodies. But if people of color and women aren't getting elected and they're the chief elected official, and we have to, we have to have them on our boards by statute, how do we do that? It's hard. And I think, the MPO model is predicated on sort of a more of a county government system. We just don't have in Massachusetts. So, we're trying to put a round cylinder into a square peg to a certain extent, but round peg into a square hole. There it is. But that's why we're here. So yeah, I do think we need to talk about election of board members. I do want to talk about permanent members as well. Besides MassDOT, it's MAPC and the advisory board. Did I miss anybody, Eric?
Advisory council.
The city of Boston as well.
That's true. Boston and the advisory council in 2011 was made a voting member. I remember when they weren't.
In Massport.
And I was gonna say in Massport.
Massport, yeah, I forgot about them. So, those are interesting organizations. Do we, I think we should talk about that. I will definitely want to consider Mass Dot and its large presence. I very curious to have that conversation. Very curious to also hear, if we could, from the secretary, who theoretically holds all of those seats, with the possible exception of the general manager's seat. When the MPO was sort of created and the seats were divvied up, the model was very different in terms of governance from what it is now. I've often felt that if somebody were smart, they could go to the MassDOT board and get a resolution passed, bring it to the MPO, and get whatever they wanted approved, which defeats the purpose in many ways. If all the MassDOT people were voting in unison, but I do want to talk about that. I'm not sure how to talk about that though. That's a bit of an elephant in the room here, and I don't know how to even go about discussing that. But I think we need to. I'm not sure that it is entirely representative for MassDOT to have so many people voting the same way all the time. But that's my opinion. And I don't get any money from MassDOT, so I can have that opinion.
I mean, that's a reasonable point, but that may be beyond the scope. And again, it's certainly up to this committee to decide what their scope is. But that is really opening up the whole MOU. Look, I think that if this body does a good job with addressing this list of issues in the operations plan, that may make the MPO run more smoothly, and it may help the members feel more empowered. I mean, who knows? And staff for that matter. And so that's that was the kernel of our recommendation. And so I think once that happens, then maybe, Brian, the discussion that you would want to have about MPO membership might be more fruitful.
Well, I agree, and I do think it is germane.
Perfection is the enemy of the good, right, Brian? And sometimes you need to, how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. So, sometimes you just need to get started, right?
No, absolutely, but I do think it is germane.
I can have 1,000 more mixed metaphors, but
please do. Well, given that we're discussing now, I think we've moved on to the next one, which is officers of the board, which is, obviously the secretary represented by OTP all the time, which is basically MassDOT. I think it is germane. Sorry, Len, did you raise your hand?
Well, I was going to discuss this. I thought what you were about to discuss was what we were discussing. So now I put my hand down because you're about to launch into what I was interested in. Thank you.
Well, no, you'll say it much more eloquently than I, so please go ahead.
Oh, you're going to set the stage, so all right. And well, I was just thinking, well, maybe you might want to discuss, what what the officers are of the board. Maybe we should entertain the notion of us electing the chair and vice chair of the board. That might affect the way the agenda are set for various meetings. About if that is part of the MOU and we're locked in, then we're locked in. And I am very respectful of scope, so I don't want us to get caught up in doing stuff that we can't do or that we should do it some other time.
Hi, Tegan, go ahead.
Hi, so I just wanted to add to some context for this conversation, which is that the bullet points alone on the slide are can be taken in quite a few different ways. And I just wanted to remind all of you that when you look at the memo, there is some additional kind of detail or clarification in the bullets underneath those that suggest what is more within the scope of the operations plan and would not include things that would be things that would affect the MOU. So I still am completely, agnostic and supportive if this committee wants to discuss things that are within the operations plan and also outside of the operations plan. But if you want a reminder as to sort of what elements of this were recommended in that memo for the operations plan, you can also see that in the memo. So like I have it open for me all the time in the background so that I can constantly remind myself, because it's very hard for me to always remember. And just to Len's point, I do remember at least that in the MOU, it does state that the chair is Mass DOT, right? So, and what we had suggested for review in the operations plan in the memo, and again, you all can divert from that memo. We had suggested and really looking at the officers and defining where there is an election, which there is for the vice chair, defining the process, further clarifying any other details about those roles that aren't in the MOU, like terms, authority, responsibilities, those sorts of things. So additional kind of information about the roles. So if I recall, the one thing that's fixed on this one is that Massad is the chair, meaning the MOU is fixed on it. But then these other elements can be discussed. So I hope you don't mind me just adding that in there. I think it's useful to keep reminding ourselves of the various layers here.
Eric, do you want to comment on the election terms, authority, and responsibility for the vice chair's position?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to Tegan's point, it's supposed to be an elected position, and in past years, MassDOT would nominate us, there'd be a meeting, they would nominate us, there would sort of be concurrence. I feel like we haven't done that in a while, so this needs to be something that's written down. Like, what is the process for that? Is it an annual term? Is it 3 years like the municipal seats? So I think we need to do that. And I would agree with Tegan. I think things that are spelled out in the MOU are things that I don't feel like that's our charge right now of tackling. I think we can highlight them, to Ken's point, and then at the end of this, if there is then sort of a desire to kind of reopen that or have a conversation there. But I feel like, as Tegan said, I think that the memo lays out kind of what the focus should be for these different topic areas.
Is there anything written down about the vice chair position, or have you ever seen anything?
It said in the MOU, it says there will be a position of the vice chair, and it says something about it'll be elected, I think. Tegan, I know you have the MOU at your fingertips.
Well, and then when you set the agenda, is there a procedure laid out for that, or is it just sort of practice?
Well, again, I think that is something that can be, the operations plan can define, because that's not well defined. And I think the MOU about setting in the agenda says the chair and the vice chair will meet and set an agenda, I think. But beyond that, it's I don't think it goes much beyond that. So again, I agree. I agree with Eric that we need to be careful about scope creep, because if some of these big MOU issues, the issue, just for some historical context, some people may remember this, some may not, but having the state be the chair was the subject of a negotiation back in the late 80s, the late 90s, I want to say, with the whole central artery and federal highway at the time wanted to expand the MPO to include direct elected officials, which were not at the time. And that was sort of the trade-off. And that took years, years to negotiate that. And I think then maybe, I would never be opposed to reopening that. But I think if this group does its job and gets the operations plan done, then that will set the stage for it, maybe having those broader discussions about, the MOU and what it means. And I think the operations plan will go a long way in terms of, I hope, will help empower MPO members to feel like they can talk, to help set the agenda, do all those things. and know what everybody's role is. And I think that that may be helpful in addressing these larger issues. But if you try to tackle those larger issues now, guess what? You're going nowhere. That's sort of my opinion. I've seen it before, I guess.
So Tegan, I appreciate what you just put up here. And I guess this brings me to my first sort of request of you and the team is, can someone go through the MOU and pull out all of the things that we are supposed to do according to it? You know what I
So
mean?
may I just sort of clarify? So what you're looking for is maybe like a very trimmed down version of the MOU that is just kind of clearly pulling out just the functions.
Just the action items and a rough timeline.
We can
I
do
think-
that.
I
Yeah.
think that's how we'll get to an operations plan skeleton, at least to start.
You mean the
Well, I
MOU or the
think we have
report?
an operations plan skeleton right in these topics, unless there's something that's.
Well, so just based on what Tegan just shared, it's pretty clear here what there's things that the board is supposed to do that is supposed to operationalize, and it seems like we're not. So if there's other things like this, I'd like to know. Does that seem reasonable, Tegan, or is that too much?
I mean, yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Eric.
I was gonna say, I feel like this is what Federal Highway and Transit did, is they went through the MPO as part of the review, and certification review. They highlighted a number of areas, and then Tegan and MPO staff then built off of that to create that memo of topical items that really need to be kind of operationalized. I think that it covers everything that is sort of touching on issues that are in the MOU and otherwise. Would you agree with that, Tegan?
Yeah, I do think so. What I will offer is that there are ways that we can try to process and share information that make it easier to navigate this. I am happy to make an attempt to do that. So, to Brian's point, if a trimmed down version of the MOU is a useful reference point, we can always follow up with whatever action items we have after these meetings, prioritize what we have time for. And when things like that are useful, we are happy to try to support this group by making those materials available. So, Brian, we can talk a little bit more about it also in a debrief after this, but if that's a tool that's useful, I'm happy to do it. I find it difficult myself to constantly go back and look at the MOU with all the other language in it. I mean, it wouldn't be much more than sort of cutting and pasting the same language because we wouldn't want to reinterpret anything. That's more be like just deleting excessive words kind of thing and the things that aren't action oriented, I guess.
I think the real value will also be trying to put some kind of a time band around it. So we should probably elect the vice chair at the first meeting of the year. I mean, that seems reasonable to me. I hope it seems reasonable to everybody else. So if we know we're supposed to do that at, a certain meeting, can we put that down? And I don't think that's necessarily interpretive for you or for the team. It's really just kind of common sense. So I guess what I'm asking for is, can someone go through the MOU, pull out, elect a vice chair and put a rough month around it?
Yes,
I can do that.
Okay. Yeah.
And then similar things like this. So, if we all know we're supposed to do the tip at a certain point in time, we're supposed to do the UPWP at a certain point in time. Let's try to get that written down and memorialized, and then we can advance from there. Because I do want to move forward on this. I don't want to, I hear what you folks are saying, that we risk analysis paralysis by trying to be philosophical, and I get that. Sorry,
So I
take you off.
I was going to say, there is a section in this around the work products. And in that, I think there is some ability to discuss some of those dates around like work products, for example. Then there will be dates around the elections. And I think maybe what you're saying is at some point in time, you might want to see all of that sort of wrapped up together into some sort of an understanding of the timeline of these various things. And that should all be embedded in the operations plan. I don't know that we have all of those dates ready to go, all compared to each other in one place. We do have a really good kind of calendar we use internally that lays out all the key dates for certain work products, but some of this we can do right away, and some of it might have to evolve as we have this conversation.
Of course. Right, but I think if we can get started on that and you can share roughly something next time, then we can discuss filling in the blanks and begin to really discuss how we operationalize some of the things, some of the gaps. It's almost like a gap analysis in a backwards kind of way. Okay.
Brian, at some point, maybe at the end of this meeting, we should confirm what that next time is, because that does also
Yes.
determine how much we'll do.
No,
Now there's
absolutely.
one scheduled for next week.
Why don't we do that now? When is this scheduled to? 4?
Yes, this meeting is scheduled till 4.
Okay. So let's talk about when we want to meet up again. I will be very honest with everybody. Thursdays are just getting terrible for me because the MassDOT and the MBTA board likes to meet on Thursday mornings. But if Thursdays work for everybody else, what the next meeting of this is the 16th?
Yes, that is to discuss the budget for the year. So that won't be to discuss this. That would be the regular ANF meeting, the meeting to discuss the CTPS budget for the year.
Is that at 9 a.m.?
That would be at 9 a.m. Yes.
I mean, I'm fine with other days than Thursdays. I think the deal was before, the virtual world, we would try and do everything on one day, so that people didn't have to trek back and forth. That was a rationale for it, I thought. But I can do other days than Thursday. I just need to know enough in advance. Mornings are generally better, yeah. But as long as I know far enough in advance, I can do other things. The second Wednesday of the month, there's the RTAC Advisory Council meeting. So I'm kind of locked into that one from 2:30 to 4:15. So I just put that out there, Brian.
Eric, Derek, are there days of the week that are better or worse for you?
I mean, considering we're going to be heading into the summer, I would say let's avoid Fridays maybe, but otherwise, I think if we can get a calendar, out far enough advance, then the next couple of weeks are tough for me, but we can figure it out.
How is Wednesday, July? Come on. Wednesday, July 13th for folks.
I know I will be away that week.
That works fine for me.
Yeah, let me just check. I think it's gonna work for me. I think Marty Milkovich scheduled TDM meeting, the transit model meeting. Let me just check.
As folks are checking, I'll also offer up if you think it would be easier, if we could start maybe with, like, Brian, if you wanted to identify some good times, we could always do some kind of poll of the other members.
Yeah, let's do that, Tegan. So just Thursday mornings just get very bad for me. And yeah, I think Eric's correct. Let's avoid Mondays and Fridays in the summer.
Yeah, the 13th will work for me. And my suggestion when you do the polls, try to make the response time on the short side, like a few days, because sometimes people put out these polls and they give people 2 weeks to respond. And it's like you're trying to accommodate as many times as possible. You can't keep all those times open, and so it's like 2 weeks later you get back to me. And it's like, well, that time was open 2 weeks ago, but it's not now. So if we could limit them to 3 or 4 days to get back, that'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah, with just a few minutes left, I also wonder, just to make these meetings kind of efficient, do we want to kind of maybe, plan out a schedule where we sort of say okay, we're going to cover these 3 or 4 issues at each meeting. And then I do feel like having just kind of an open-ended, what do you think about this conversation might not be super productive, but maybe more actually try to flesh out beforehand, some key questions that we have, or maybe even react to something that staff like starts with.
Yep.
I
I
you know,
agree.
when we were doing the that committee last summer that looked at the cost increases, I tried to prep a little bit with staff ahead of time, like what are some of the key kind of questions that we wanted, to put in front of everyone, or what were some of the like what were different options of doing things. So that could be an approach.
And links to any reading material, even if it's been posted before, you just have the catalog, or not even the catalog, just a couple of links, to the documents that would be handy for people to pull up. That'd be good, because I download things and then sometimes I lose track of them. So.
No, Eric, I completely agree, and we're making the sausage here, but I think we're getting closer to to getting it a little more the way we want it to. So I guess for the next meeting in July, what I would like to do is see if Jonathan and you folks can get us that pared down MOU with some time bands on it for when things are due. And I think that will really help us discuss what we need to add to that or continue to that. Otherwise, I think we should try to take 3 of these bullets and their associated information meeting by meeting and kind of go through them and see what questions we have, or where we agree or where we disagree. I would love to hear from, well, maybe we've decided the subregion thing is out of scope, and that's okay. But I do think we need to get the election stuff, definitely written down. I know it's written down, but we need to get it formalized. And I do want to discuss the permanent members at some point. But let's look at the sort of calendar that comes back next time for when work products and actions have to happen. And I think that will help us fill in kind of where we go from there. And yes, Eric, I will talk to you about a week in advance of that in July, and we can have a discussion.
Do we have a deadline for trying to get this done? That's another question I have. I feel like of all the items here, as we talked earlier, kind of figuring out the election of board members, we do sort of need to do that soon, or just kind of run it like we've always run it and then decide.
I thought that's what we decided the last time. I might be mistaken.
Actually, not, the MPO voted to several months ago now to have sub-regional elections, so that.
Yeah, no.
If it can't get done, look, in terms of, to answer your question, Eric, in terms of the timing, the recommendation to develop the operations plan was the result of our certification review 3 years ago. We're gearing up for the next certification review soon. And if this MPO wants to be certified, and I think you do, we can very easily turn this into a certification requirement as opposed to a recommendation. I'm not trying to threaten them, but look, this is 3 years overdue. Let's get this done.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%.
It's actually 20 years. It's actually 10 years overdue.
Well, it's 40 years overdue.
I mean, come on.
No, I wasn't proposing like kicking it off. I was trying to get a sense of, are we trying to accomplish something by the end of the summer or in 4 months or what it was? And what I meant by the election process, Ken, was just like you had brought up the issue of do we do a caucus, or what I was saying was by doing it like we've always done. I meant like it's a vote, it's a ballot vote is what I meant.
All right, well, look, that's up to what are the options? Maybe Eric, you can, or Brian, and you can work with staff to define the options and put a piece of paper in front, like you said, Eric, what are the questions that need to be answered? Answer those questions and staff can go off and write it up. I mean, I think, rather than just knocking off 3 of these at a meeting, which is perfectly fine if you can, I think you might want to prioritize them first so that you can do them in a logical order. If there's some things do have a time constraint, like the elections, you want to get that done first. Other things don't. But, I'm with you, Eric. Let's get, let's get paper, questions on paper. So we can start, developing the answers, right? So.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think we all agree.
Yeah.
So let's see, go ahead, Tegan.
To say to that note, to something very pragmatic as the next step. I mean, I think we as staff can volunteer to work with those of you who have already, and we have information about the elections. And we could create some kind of format, like a page or a worksheet that has some proposed, what we know, questions of what we don't know. And we can work with members of this committee in between the meetings to do that, as long as we have enough time to do that. So we could support coming to the next meeting with some kind of page that would help facilitate the discussion of the election, for example, if that's what you would like, Brian, and the committee would like.
No, I think let's definitely put the focus on the election, but I do want to see what else the board has committed to doing and when.
Yep.
Please.
Yes.
And I think that will help us understand what the gaps are. Okay, it's 4:02. Anybody have anything else? Tegan and Jonathan, you'll send out a doodle poll or some equivalent?
Yes, we will. Yes, we will.
Great, thank you. Okay, if nobody has anything else, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Without objection, David Muller's finest. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.